Welcome to Hard Hats and Horizons, the podcast where we dig deep into the construction and economic development shaping the future of Dallas-Fort Worth. We bring you insights from industry leaders and visionaries who are driving growth in North Texas. From construction projects to industry trends and insights, we cover it all. So grab your hard hat and join us as we explore the people and projects shaping the skyline of DFW. Now, here is your host, Andrea Pender.
We have Brooks Powell on the podcast today, so thank you for coming on. He is a senior associate with DLR Group. So why don't you start us off and tell us a little bit about what you guys do over there?
Sure. So we're a global integrated design firm. We're about 1,800 professionals in 37 offices. We are a fully integrated team. So architects, engineers, planners, interior designers. I work in a hybrid between our mixed use sector, which for us is multifamily and retail. And then the other side of my brain is K-12. So I spend a lot of time with school districts, both public and private on the education side. And it's been 4 years that I've been at DLR Group. And
It seems like 5 minutes ago.
I know.
Yeah.
But it was the hardest decision and the best decision I had to make leaving Brooks Powell, but going to DLR Group, just the way the business is run, it's just a fascinating change for me. And I told myself everybody has to-do lists, right? And I have a to-be list.
Ooh, I like that.
So one of the things that was really important to me is spending time with big thinkers that really focus on trends, focus on big ideas and that kind of thing. And so that's really what I was very fortunate to find at DLR Group is just we have folks that do everything.
Nice.
The first week I was there, I was asked a question about a workplace environment where somebody wanted to do, it was a Chinese company and they wanted to do a feng shui aligned or feng shui inspired office environment. And so I said, well, I know that this is a shot in the dark. So we have all these internal messaging boards. And so I put out there, I said, okay, this is my challenge. Do we know anything about this?
Somebody's got to be an expert.
5 minutes, our design research leader out of Charlotte said, okay, well, here's 3 case studies that we've done with our Shanghai office where we had alignment on Eastern design principles. And anyway, it's a fascinating organization because we make investments in those things, but also we're employee owned. So we feel really personally invested in all of those things too. So yeah, it's been a fascinating professional change, but also just really personally gratifying.
So I know you're super involved in the local market. Are you dealing in these other markets on a regular basis, or how does that kind of balance with your job?
Yeah. So for us, Texas is its own region.
Okay.
So we have 4 offices, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, and Houston. Fort Worth is our newest office, but I also lead our entertainment district strategy globally. So we're talking about a mix of our sports sector, our mixed use sector, transportation and infrastructure, cultural and performing arts, justice and civic. So all of those different verticals all converge where there's a meaningful alignment with entertainment district type, either sports anchored or sometimes it's even like a healthcare anchored mixed use environment, which isn't necessarily entertainment, but it's all about where museums or cultural venues or all of those things kind of catalyze what's around them. So I get to participate in conversations on a national level there. I also sit on our national mixed use forum, which gives me an opportunity to kind of see what's happening across all sectors and all regions within the firm. So again, we're global. So we have folks from our Middle East offices and Asia, as well as all of our North American offices from Toronto to Austin, I guess is further south. But yeah, it's just really, it's amazing to get to be part of that level of national influence.
That is neat because so many times you're kind of stuck in your little bubble.
Right.
And even though Texas is a big bubble,
It
like
is.
you can get stuck in, I mean, we don't deal with projects in Shanghai. I have no clue what's going on over there with projects. So that's pretty interesting that you get to just have the opportunity to hear, like, what are these people doing?
Yeah. Well, and we're reminded often, especially with what's going on now in the Middle East, our Riyadh office and our Um, I mean, our global leadership is very much paying attention to
Mm,
what's happening there,
right.
in Dubai as well, just keeping us abreast
Mhm,
of how our people are doing,
mhm.
how they're reacting to what's happening. Clearly, it's not just happening within Iran. It's happening all over the Middle East, and
Right.
so our folks are not directly in harm's
Mhm.
way, but it just reminds us that we're not just a US based corporation, that we have global
Right.
impacts, but also global obligation to make sure that we're taking care of our people, but that we're also making a significant design impact on a worldwide scale.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you put a bunch of notes on here, which I greatly appreciate. So I know I feel like you eat, breathe, and sleep this industry. And so
To a fault.
you're
Yeah.
you're very involved. And so I want to hear about, I'm gonna kind of pick and choose from some of these bullet points. And so you mentioned the National Urban Plan Facilitator with ULI, that you've been doing this for over 7 years. So talk to us a little bit about this, because a 7 year commitment, that's a lot. So you must like it a little bit.
I love it. I say this often and I mean it. It is easily one of the most gratifying things I get to do as a volunteer. Urban Plan is a development scenario that was developed at University of California at Berkeley 20 years ago that was intended to teach high school students about real estate development. And so it uses Lego Duplo blocks and essentially challenges students. And of course, we do it here in Dallas Fort Worth with high school students, with undergraduate, graduate, and then with elected officials and community groups. But this exercise basically divides up a team into 5 different roles, and you are challenged with a fictional municipality issuing an RFP for a 5.5 block redevelopment.
Gosh, that's a big project.
It's a huge project. So it like when you're all said and done building out these 5.5 blocks, it's about 350, $400 million worth of construction
Uh-huh,
costs. So you're doing everything from office buildings and multifamily to retail. There's a homeless shelter question the teams have to answer. Do you incorporate a big box retail store or do you include a neighborhood grocer? Do you
mm,
include, high rise buildings? Do you keep it neighborhood scale? There's affordable housing questions. There's subsidies. There's just all of these different. I mean, we even get into supply and demand where teams have to
mm,
understand what absorption rates are
oh,
and how you have met the demand for the marketplace and sort of what this scenario really requires in terms of a successful development. So at the end of all of these choices that these teams have made,
mhm,
then we actually have them present to our mock city council,
uh-huh,
and defend all the decisions and tell their story and use their creativity. And I can't tell you how amazing it is to be in a classroom with high school students who are just number one, I mean, they get it,
mm,
but they also bring their lived experiences with them
uh,
to this exercise. So I'm working, I won't say which campuses, but I'm working in 2 extremes right now. I have a STEM academy, and actually, maybe on that end, I have a STEM academy and I have a magnet sort of choice school
uh-huh,
in inner city neighborhoods.
uh-huh,
And then I am working at one of the most affluent high schools in North Texas. And it is
I
fascinating to walk into those classrooms and to hear the students talk about their development proposals because you'll hear them say, in the more modest, economically situated schools, you'll hear those students talk about what's around them in their neighborhood. So
mm,
this is where the Five Below is, and this is where the
right,
bodega is,
right,
this
right,
is where the gas station is, and this is where the laundromat is. And when I go into the affluent school, it's okay, this is the Lululemon store, and
interesting,
here's the Apple store, and
uh-huh,
here's the luxury condo building, and here's the and so it's not a fault by any means. I mean, these students are using the experiences that they've grown up with.
right,
But it's just amazing to see them challenged with some of these things because, for better or for worse, sometimes they struggle with the homeless shelter question.
mm,
And
mhm,
it's okay, well, we don't see a place for those people
mm,
in our development. And so the question becomes because there's a penalty for not including the homeless shelter. It's $1 million back to the city in
uh,
this development scenario. And so it's like so the students that were and that's not the rule by any means. I mean, we see a lot of teams that really deal with these complicated issues
mhm,
with amazing sensitivity. So I don't want to cast
right, right, right,
aspersions and
right,
say that they're not. or that they are consistently kind of addressing those issues in the similar way. But I guess what I would say is it's just amazing where the choice school and the STEM school, where there is a homeless shelter down the street
Right.
from where they are going to school, and they tell us when we're in those volunteer sessions, this is not abstraction for us. We
Right.
see these folks every day,
Right.
and our school is right here. And so this is not a foreign concept where these are folks that we just kind of see out on the street corner or,
Right.
wandering down the highway. These are folks that we know by name
Mhm.
because they're regulars in our neighborhood.
Mhm.
And so it just, and that's
Mhm.
not the only issue or the biggest issue in that exercise. But what I see as the biggest takeaway is that these students sort of get a career day every time we go into the classroom as volunteers because they get to ask us questions about what we do in our day jobs.
Right.
And also we challenge them big
Okay.
time
Yeah.
about some of the decisions that they're making. And it's not just, okay, did you include the homeless shelter? Or did you include
Right.
affordable housing? Or
Right.
did you include
Uh,
some of these other things? But we really try to make it a really high impact experience so that they're walking away from
Mhm.
this going, okay, not only did I learn about careers in real estate, but I learned how to apply these really complex principles. And I now feel like I have not just a common language to share with my community where I can go and now advocate when there are development projects or things happening in my neighborhood. I feel a sense of agency to participate in that dialogue where I really have a role or I understand my role better so that I can talk to a development team or I can talk to the city
Mhm.
and I can say, I understand that this is the plan and here's how it affects my neighborhood.
Mhm.
So that really is about that empowerment and impact that we're trying to teach these students.
Is this a one day, all day? Did you already say that? Is this a one day scenario situation
It's
or multiple?
So we do it in
Mhm.
two kind of settings. One is like a 15-hour class
Okay.
instruction period
Uh-huh.
where, and generally that's in our high school, undergraduate, and graduate programs
Uh-huh.
where they will actually be taught the exercise and go through
Got it.
part of their
Got
co-curricular
it. Uh-huh.
experience
Uh-huh.
with either it's economics or history or social sciences of some
Uh,
kind. And then in a workshop format, that's
mhm.
often where we'll see like public officials
Okay. Okay.
or neighborhood groups that just want to condense it. They want to learn about it and they want to
Uh-huh.
experience it, but it's much more compact.
I feel like there's so many things out there that like you know a little bit about, but you can't speak to it 100%. Or, well, that's somebody else because they know how to do it.
Right.
There's so many government things, political things where unless you know, you don't know.
That's right.
And if you don't have a class or a situation like this to even start teaching you, where do I even start?
Right.
A lot of people they're just not gonna start.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
that's interesting. I bet it's fascinating to see, like, the kids work together versus the already
Yeah.
elected officials
Yes.
and those kinds of people work together.
Well, and what I love is when I am facilitating, especially the workshops, I go and research each person that's participating and
Okay.
I assign them a role that's very different than their day job. Because
Okay.
the natural tendency
Uh-huh.
is to want to do what you're comfortable with.
Right.
So we want them outside their comfort zone, not only because we're challenging them with some really complex, potentially controversial
Right.
things,
Right.
but we want them not to just settle back into those
Mhm.
patterns. The other thing that we deal with sometimes is a dynamic where an elected official and a city staff member are on the same team, or we've got an elected official and maybe someone in the real estate development community who's participating in the exercise. And sometimes they're really guarded with what they say or
Mhm.
how they participate in the exercise because they don't want to make an enemy out of the
Right.
person who's got a,
Right.
perceived real life influence over what's happening in the exercise and the team dynamic. But that's also where we like one of the roles in the exercise is a neighborhood liaison.
Huh?
So we give them some letters that are essentially written by some of these neighborhood groups, and they all are either single issue or
Uh,
multi issue groups, but they're all representative of, say, 400 homeowners and taxpayers, or a group of teenagers that just wants a skate park,
right.
or a
Uh-huh.
university or a church. And so all of these letters that we're giving them talk
Uh-huh.
about the things that these groups want or don't want as
Okay.
part of the development
Uh-huh.
exercise. So that's part of the balancing act is
Uh-huh.
these teams have to navigate, all right, we know we can't make everybody happy, but we need to somehow reach an accommodation so that when we sell our plan to the city council, if, say, somebody on the city council represents one of those groups or has ties to one of those groups, we're communicating to them how we made those trade-offs so that it's clear that we thought through what they were asking for,
Yeah.
but couldn't necessarily accommodate everything. So, and that's the same thing we get in that kind of elected or staff dynamic too. Is, we see those dynamics and we see where the politics kind of manifests itself.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but working with the Oak Lawn Committee, that's
That was going to be my next. And let's talk about the Oak Lawn Committee. So that, let me put a little check mark right here.
yeah.
This is
Well,
perfect.
so it's funny because I so I was at a high school a couple weeks ago and I was meeting with a group of these neighborhood liaison team members, and we were talking about what does this role really mean. And so I was sitting there talking to them and saying, look, like, I'm part of one of those neighborhood groups. I sit on the board for the
Mhm.
Oak Lawn Committee, which basically oversees development within PD 193 in Dallas, which spans all the way from Victory Park up to Knox Henderson, over to Inwood Road, and then across to kind of the eastern edge of Knox, and the Henderson
It's a
side.
big chunk of land.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's absolutely massive. And it was all adopted under the auspices of the Oak Lawn Plan, which essentially was created in the 80s to not control, but to encourage the quality and character development that Oak Lawn and Uptown are known for. I
Hmm.
mean, they're easily Dallas's most desirable neighborhoods. They're
Yeah.
some of the most privileged places in town. And so what we do as an organization is we work with developers who are seeking variances for projects that they want to bring to market that exceed the existing zoning. And
Okay.
so if it's a setback variance, or if there's height, density, landscaping, a litany of different things we hear from development teams, we just work with them to reach an accommodation so that it works for the neighborhood.
Hmm.
And we have 200 members and they're very active.
Hmm.
And it's fascinating because when I go back to that high school classroom and I'm describing this to those students and I'm saying, I'm part of this organization where we are advocating for certain things. And so if you're dealing in urban plan, that all of that again feels like it's just a concept, but I'm telling them, look, like, I can point you to a specific case in a specific neighborhood where there is a neighborhood association who is really adamantly opposed to a project that is on the boards right now. And we have set up a case committee inside the Oak Lawn Committee to meet with the neighborhood and meet with the development teams and try to get to a yes.
Hmm.
And as much as we can. And so anyway, I love urban plan as an exercise largely because it gives students
Hmm.
those opportunities to really see behind the curtain of what's happening
Hmm.
in commercial real estate, but also what's likely to impact their neighborhoods
Hmm.
at some point in their
Right.
lives. And now they've gone through an exercise where I remember this now. I remember what it felt like to try to balance all those things. And
Right.
and then when I describe to them things that are happening in the real world, they're like, "Oh, okay. Well, now I realize
Now I
that,
get it.
yeah, maybe these things, maybe I should be part of a neighborhood association like this, or I should research what neighborhood associations
Mhm.
are around where I live, or
Segue that, like, how did you hear about the Oak Lawn Committee? How did you get interested in it? How would other people find these committees to join?
sure." So the Oakland Committee, again, it was founded in 1982. And so it's, over 40 years old. And so I found it because Oak Lawn exerts a lot of influence over new development projects in North Texas, certainly in Dallas proper. And it was an organization where people treat it with reverence, that it's a group that is trying to make Dallas's most attractive neighborhoods more attractive, but also it's hard to balance some of these
Mhm.
things. And so I think that's where what I've learned from the time that I've been on the Oak Lawn Committee and since joining the board and serving on the executive committee is, we review these proposals in detail and we try to coach groups through challenging situations where, we know that our members are going to potentially push back on some of these things. And so we try to give them some tools, and some advice on how to thoughtfully present what they're asking for.
Mhm.
And so since I live in PD 193, I work in PD 193. Those are some of the requirements for membership.
Ah, okay.
You can
Okay.
also be an investor,
Okay.
either a
Uh-huh.
landowner or a
Mhm.
business owner in PD 193. But again, it's all folks who are personally invested
Mhm.
or professionally
Right.
invested in that giant swath of
Right.
land, who are members and who vote and who voice their opinions. And it's just I just feel like it's important to have engagement opportunities like that, because we see things ahead of what's happening in the marketplace. Obviously, folks have worked really hard to put together a development proposal and come to us with those things, because
Mhm.
they're very serious about getting them through. Often they go from the Oaklawn Committee with our support or not to Plan Commission. And then ultimately those variances that they're seeking are approved by council. And so we're just one of the stops along
Mhm.
the way. But
Mhm.
those are the things that we start to see higher density development, but it's generally high quality
Mhm. Mhm.
development. And so we're
Mhm.
excited that
Yeah.
developers want to invest in Dallas, and continue to help grow and densify the urban core. Because I think that's one of the greatest things in terms of Dallas's strength, as we talk about what's happening with downtown and what's
I feel like
happening.
you're like reading my mind over here because I was
Well,
gonna be like, let's talk about downtown. So
yeah.
let's talk about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I attended, so being part of the Urban Land Institute, I always love that we are on the cutting edge of thought leadership
Uh-huh.
in as
Uh-huh.
many ways as we can be. And I loved the breakfast forum that we did a couple weeks ago. We had Lucy Billingsley
Uh-huh.
from Billingsley Company, we had Tyler Kleinert from Hunt, we had Bill Brokaw from Hillwood, and then we had an urban planner. And the conversation really centered around downtown revitalization.
Mhm.
And one of the very first things that got addressed is what to do with City Hall, which obviously is,
Uh-huh.
and it's one of the biggest questions on everyone's mind right now. And reasonable people disagree about what to do with City Hall. I know there are lots of folks who would be happy to see it gone. Working in architecture, my dad is an architect. I believe that there is something special about that building, and I understand the value of the land, and I understand maybe the challenge that it poses with the location,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
especially with the potential connectivity of a new something, if it's an arena or if it's something else next to the convention center.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I totally get that. I just wonder if there is a middle way
Right.
for us to get something really just high impact that
Mhm.
could be contributing to the vibrance of downtown.
Mhm.
The question about AT&T and leaving downtown, and some of the things that have come out recently, even in today's paper, about some of the things where there were negotiations and discussions early on where AT&T was expressing concerns about Dallas, about downtown Dallas in particular. What can we do? One of the topics from the breakfast forum was about repositioning office buildings
Mhm.
into mixed use residential
Uh-huh.
retail,
Uh-huh.
even gosh, data centers or other things. I mean, there's a litany
Mhm.
of different
Mhm.
things that you could do with residential or with office towers that are potentially being repositioned. But when we saw 1401 Elm go into foreclosure at the National, and arguably that's one of the most successful repositioning projects,
Mhm.
but to see the developer default and let it go
Mhm.
back to the lender. And then that same developer just decamped all of downtown in the East Quarter. And so my question to the panel was, is this a cautionary tale or is this an outlier? And,
Uh-huh.
we'll really see the economic story play out where you really can reposition all these buildings and it really does work. And Lucy said outright, it's going to take public private partnership strategies
Mhm.
to really make these repositioning projects work. And I feel like that's something we're really going to have to take a hard look at, because with $3 billion plus dollars being spent on the convention center, which is all hotel occupancy tax, which presumably is not technically a tax increase, but it is something that, is absolutely public funding. And then what else is happening to some of those existing buildings? Are we setting up a tax increment financing system, or what is ultimately going to be the mechanism by which we start to achieve some of those repositioning and create a 24-hour population downtown, or
Mhm.
some of those other things? It's a really tough nut to crack.
Why do you think that we don't do those PPP things as often as other cities? Like, I feel like you hear public private partnerships and like I know I've been to like SMPS conferences and things like that, and they're talking about it left and right. I'm like, gosh, we just don't do it here as much as these other places.
Yeah.
Kind of a
I,
loaded question, but
well, I think so. So I might push back a little bit to say I think we do some of them. The
Mhm,
Omni Dallas was a P3 that was there. There was public support in terms of bonds that were sold, and then Matthews Southwest came in as the developer and located their own private capital stack and
mhm,
and made that into. And so there are examples for sure of
uh-huh.
successful P3. The fundamental with P3s is this proverbial four, right? So
Ah,
but for public support, this could not happen because the
ah,
private sector doesn't have the resources and can't attract enough private investment, either on the debt side or the equity side, to make it happen.
gotcha. Okay.
And so the idea that there's public participation makes a lot of sense, that if truly this is a priority for the municipality or for whatever entity is putting up the public funding, selling
Mhm,
bonds or however they're
mhm,
achieving that
mhm.
that funding. But I think it also comes down to projects of enormous scale
Right,
where you really have to have
right.
a major just weight
Mm,
behind a project, and you also have to have political will to do it. And I think there's a lot of folks right now. I mean, I can see these developers really overtly talking about what to do with City Hall. And,
mhm, mhm.
are we going to go take down a lease somewhere else? I'm going to go a little bit on my soapbox because I have seen Dallas make some really boneheaded real estate decisions. You may have heard of the Lemon on Stemmons,
Uh-huh,
which
uh-huh.
was an office building that the city of Dallas acquired that was ultimately where the city of Dallas permitting office was. And it was so shot full of holes, not literally, but it was unoccupiable in the sense that it didn't even have a certificate of
Oh
occupancy.
my.
And so, and a lot of the people who were part of that scenario or that situation are no longer with the city of
They didn't
Dallas.
come to your ULI
They
class.
clearly did not, but I also know that that is not indicative of the city's ability to make smart real estate decisions. And I know we've got millions of square feet spread across the city in all kinds of city buildings and services. And we've already talked about or heard talk about relocating 911 and 311 into a new facility or a different facility. It's interesting to think about what the city is doing with its resources and really
Mhm,
being a
mhm,
good steward of the public's trust and those dollars that are all supported by taxpayers. But I just would like for us, and I'm sure the private sector is doing their level best to advise the city on what's happening. I know there's a lot of really smart tenant reps and brokers out there who are going to be part of that dialogue and discussion. In fact, more than likely have been already.
mhm,
In
mhm,
fact, I think that was what was covered in the paper today, is that those conversations have been ongoing for a while.
mm,
So if it was not a foregone conclusion that we were going to lose City Hall or that City Hall was going to move out of the building, maybe that's kind of been more in the works for longer than we thought it
mhm,
was.
mhm,
But I
mm,
guess I really want there to be a considered view of this, and to really consider what the implications are of decamping downtown. Because again, if what we're talking
mhm.
about is relocating the city hall function, where is it going?
Where's it going?
Yeah, I mean, you
Yeah.
saw Dallas ISD move off of Ross Avenue to north of Park Lane. And so, that's not downtown.
No.
And so all of these opportunities for people to put their money where their mouth is and invest in downtown, I would hope that the city of Dallas would
Stay downtown.
stay downtown.
Right.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Much like the city of Fort Worth did. So they
Right.
moved their
Right,
city
right.
hall from an old brutalist building
Mhm.
downtown to a gorgeous class AA office building that was originally built for Pier 1
Uh-huh.
and then was Chesapeake Energy and then became City of Fort Worth City Hall. And they built a brand new council chamber and turned it into something really special. And so is that a story that Dallas can adopt? I don't know.
I don't know either.
I would love to see where we could make an investment so that we don't lose City Hall if it does relocate
Mhm,
from the urban
mm.
core. Because again, those are all people, hundreds of city employees that go to work there every day
Right.
and presumably go and buy lunch from somewhere or go out after work.
Right.
Or, those are people that
Mhm.
have folks coming in and spending nights on hotels that are visiting the city or wanting to do business with the city and all those things. If we're making an investment in downtown, we ought to make an investment in downtown and
Mhm.
really double down on it.
Every time I hear about the city hall, I think about the library
Mhm.
next door. It's built to like, mirror
Yes,
each other.
exactly.
I love reading and then I'm
Yeah.
like, well, are they going to tear this down? And then what happens to the library? And then do you know anything about the Oaklawn Library?
Well, yes. So I've heard that there's still a push for it to be preserved, that it will remain open. But that was a real disappointment for me to hear that it was potentially on the chopping block.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting the concept that they're thinking about going towards, and I sure hope that it doesn't. Don't quote me on this, but it's something like instead of having 30 branches, it would have like four main branches.
Right.
I'm like, well, kids can't walk to the library if there's only four of them,
Right.
you
Exactly.
know? I mean, sometimes you can't walk to the library just because it's a major intersection
For
that
sure.
they can't cross. Yeah, I'm curious to see. And I sure wish there was a lot more support for the library too. It's people just buy the book on Amazon. Well, not everybody has that. And they offer so much more than just books.
Exactly. Sure.
So when I was on the board for the Friends of the Dallas Public Library, one of the things that I was like, I'm going to commit to visiting all 30 branches. There there's some that took me like 45 minutes to drive to, and I'm like, "This is still a Dallas Public Library?" But the one in Oaklawn, I know a couple times I had like a weird amount of time in between meetings, and I was right there, and I was like, "I'm just gonna go plug in, turn on my Wi-Fi, and get some work done."
Yeah.
And somebody goes, "You went to the library?" And I'm like, "Well, I didn't need another coffee, so I'll just go hang out at the library for the afternoon," and it was totally
Yeah.
fine. So
Well, and I look at the functions that those places play, not just in books and contributing to literacy. I mean, truly, even as polling places or
Mhm.
as community gathering spaces and meeting
Yep.
places and all those kinds of things, it really does. Community libraries do have an essential function.
Mm.
As much as I work with K-12 districts to create amazing libraries
Right.
in their schools, those are not open all the time.
Right.
And they're also not necessarily encouraging the public to go check out a school library.
Right.
Those are for the students that are there. It's not
Right.
for, your average citizen to go
Right.
over and start checking out books because they want to control who's in there
Right.
and who's not there.
Exactly.
So public libraries really
Mhm.
are, I
Yeah.
mean, just part of the lifeblood of successful cities, and I hope that we have a more comprehensive view of what happens to that longer.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see all of those things roll out for us. Shifting a little bit, talk to us a little bit about mentorship. How have you experienced mentorship or are you mentoring anyone?
That is um, probably one of my favorite topics. I think it is so important that you both mentor and be mentored
Mhm.
as much as you can. I have been so fortunate to have just amazing professionals, personal mentors from the time that I was in high school to present. And I hope am never without somebody
Mhm.
that's filling that role. As I mentioned before, part of my to be list was that I wanted to be around people that I could aspire to be like,
Mhm.
that I could emulate, that I could ask them tough questions
Mhm.
and get really good answers. From construction to design, engineering, development, certainly in the commercial real estate space, but also folks that are in kind of public policy roles, people who are my same age, people who are much younger than me.
Mhm.
I mean, I consider anybody can be a mentor if
Yep.
you can learn something from them. So the urban plan program to me is a prime example of mentorship because I get to go in and talk to these students about an exercise, but then I get to ask them, like, where are you thinking about going to college? Or, what career path are you considering? Or, what's your, I mean, when we really get into deep conversations, it's like, what is your home life like? What are you struggling with? Is there anything? And a lot of these students I'm meeting for the first time and maybe only time, but I always say, if there's anything I can do, I am more than happy to talk with you. Um, and so those are kind of more informal mentor
Mhm,
moments.
mhm,
But I consider, especially from a business development marketing standpoint, I love talking to our young designers. One of the things I enjoy talking about is personal branding,
mhm,
where
mhm,
you say your network, your identity, your social media presence, what you write, what you contribute in meetings, the organizations you're involved in,
mhm,
the voice that you have in the community is so important, and it's never too early
mhm.
to start getting those things rolling. It's so important that young people start thinking about not just what do I want to be when I grow up?
Right.
Who do I want to be like? Who are the people that I've really looked up to and admired? And how can I kind of position myself to have a similar career trajectory to them?
Mhm,
Or how can I learn to balance what it's like to be a woman in commercial real
mhm,
estate,
mhm,
or a member of the LGBTQ plus
mhm,
community in commercial real estate, or all those kinds of things to me are just amazing,
mhm,
because you can always find somebody who will be willing to sit down with you and have a conversation,
mhm.
as long as you're open to it. But I also think the onus is always on the mentee. Whether I'm the mentee or whether I have a mentee that I'm
Right.
working with, I will always happily check in and kind of see how
Mhm,
things are
mhm,
going.
mhm,
But it means so much more to me if I'm a mentor, if someone reaches out and says, "Hey, can I have 20 minutes to sit down with you over coffee? I just want to pick your brain about X."
Yeah.
Or I just want to sit down and talk. Like, we haven't caught up in a while.
Yeah.
I just want to chat.
Mhm.
And so when I do that to my mentors, who I try to do as often as I can, as regularly as I can,
Uh-huh.
they know the things that are on my mind. And it's almost like, it's not quite like having a therapist, but it's sort of like,
It's like a work therapist.
yeah, well, I mean, it's like we've
Yeah.
had this conversation before, and so I want to catch you up on what I'm
Uh-huh.
thinking about
Yeah.
this, and like, am I on the right track? Honestly, and you're going to think this is totally bizarre, but this is a very 21st century thing. I have started using, and I'm training an AI model
Okay.
to do some kind of like on the spot kind of mentoring, kind of gut checking
Okay.
with me.
Okay.
I have trained a ChatGPT model to kind of, I've fed it enough information and it knows enough about me and some of the decisions and things that I'm grappling with. And so I go and I revisit some of those things and I'm like,
Mhm,
all right, I just need to validate this decision.
mhm.
Like, based on what you know and what we've talked about, how does this square with what I said my objectives are?
I
And
like that.
so it's sort of like, okay, well, and of course, like, a large language model is sort of like, okay, at some point it's not a therapist, and
Right, right, right.
it's not really even,
Mhm.
technically alive, obviously, but it's like, it's one of those things where you're like, okay, I got a response, and was it the response I expected? Maybe, or was it totally out of left field? And to me, that's just another way of using a tool where if I can't reach out to a live human
Mhm. Yeah.
to have
Yeah.
an on the spot
Bounce some
conversation,
ideas.
yeah, it's just
Uh-huh.
like, how are you validating decisions you're making? How are you kind of keeping consistent with your values, and how are
Mhm,
you challenging yourself at pivotal moments to say, want to make the right decision, but I'm not sure that this is the right
mhm,
path. And I'm
mhm,
kind of two minds, and I just need to kind of
mhm.
figure that out.
I signed up for a formal, like, mentor protege program just a few years ago
Yeah.
as a mentee
Uh huh.
because I was like, I kinda want a new mentor. Let's get me paired up. And so I got paired up with a amazing lady who it was like the perfect thing for, like, the time in the work and life and, the phase of life that you're in.
Yeah.
And she has since retired. I'll text her, and then now I'm like, "I'm just gonna take I need to take her to lunch,"
Yeah.
because, like, I was so used to once a month
Uh huh.
having coffee with her,
Yep.
talking her ear off, getting the advice that I needed.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just kind of miss that a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's been retired for a few months now. And so I'm like, you're still here. Can you go to lunch with me? And I know she'll love it. So
Because her advice hasn't changed. Her perspective hasn't
right.
changed. She's the same person. She's just freer with her
Yes.
time.
And there was a few things that kind of like you said, they needed to get wrapped up on. And so there was a few things that like wrapped up and I'm like, I know that we're not meeting monthly, but there's a resolution and you
Yes.
need to know about it because you
Yeah.
were a part of it for the last year and a half.
I love that.
Let's see. I feel like we have talked about a lot of good information here. One of the things that you've mentioned is like key trends to shape all of everything that's going on. What are some trends that you're seeing?
So that's a big question. Um, I think again, if I want to talk about sort of the urban revitalization piece, and again, we've talked a lot about that already, but to me, it's just we're gonna
Mhm.
have to have some really tough adult conversations about what's happening in and around Dallas, where we've got this massive bifurcation that's happening between downtown and uptown. And we've seen so many Class A users move out of office buildings downtown into brand new Class AA office buildings, paying premium rents, presumably in maybe smaller footprints, in brand new office buildings in uptown or in other parts of Dallas. I live in the Knox Henderson area, so there's a giant new mixed use development that's happening right in my neighborhood, and there's several others on the boards.
We're painting like all of them.
Yeah, well, and that's
Yeah.
amazing, like, that
Yeah.
and so to see the progress that's being made in those places, I will say.
It's crazy right there. I feel like it's been one after another since like, I don't know, 2019 or something. It's just been it's blowing and going over there.
Well, and so they're obviously Chewy's has moved out, so they're
Oh,
getting
that's
ready
right.
to break ground on that,
Yep.
and so that's another Michael Dell project, and then, in and around, I know Jonas Woods Group has their thing that's about to kind of start north of streetlights, kind of along McKinney Avenue. I mean, just that neighborhood alone, plus all the stuff that's happening, along Henderson, all of that mixed use development,
That was a lot.
it's so much. To me, I mean, I love the fact that the neighborhood has truly come alive. I mean, post COVID, it's just exploded in terms of quality and what the retenanting of some of those buildings is doing. Obviously the Pottery Barn moved out, for example, and so now they're over at North Park, and so we're going to get something in its place.
Yep.
Ralph Lauren moving from Highland Park Village over to Knox, and
Uh-huh.
there's just some interesting kind of changes in retail, and we'll have a hotel over there now where tourists will want to be, but also I know just anecdotally sitting at the bar, eavesdropping on conversations from people out of town. They're like,
Uh-huh.
man, I'm so glad that the concierge recommended we come over here and go shopping.
That's
And,
cool.
and this is such a cool little neighborhood. I
Yeah.
wish we had something like that. And so it's something to really be proud of that Dallas has those things. At the same time, there's a lot of areas of town that really are lacking in investment.
Mhm.
And so, as much as we really take care of those highly desirable neighborhoods,
Mhm.
and PD 193 is chock full of them, I would love for us to have a more comprehensive discussion
Mhm.
about where else we can be investing and
Right.
how else we can be lifting up neighborhoods and communities. Because I feel like we're such an amazing city. I mean, literally, we have such literal natural beauty here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love spending time. I was just in Seattle for a little bit and in Denver, and flying into those
Uh-huh.
places just unbelievable. And, so flying into Dallas is such a kind of, sad trombone. It's sort of like, okay, welcome to Dallas. So just
So this is what I always say. I'm like, those places have mountains and all this landscape. And I'm like a huge car buff. I'm like, we have some good cars
we
to look at. That's what I always say. I'm like, okay, we're not in the mountains anymore with all the Subarus. Like we're back in Dallas with all these crazy fancy cars that you're just like, people buy these things and drive them down the
yes.
street in Dallas.
Well, if the cost of living is less, you can afford to spend it on a car, I guess. Um, but also we're such a car centric culture that you're going to be in your
Yep.
car for so many
Mhm.
hours in the day. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, it might as well be a nice ride
Right.
because you're going to be in it for a while. But again, that's what kind of going back to the Knox question is, I love the fact that it's such a walkable neighborhood and it's getting more so. Definitely going to be more traffic.
Right.
Definitely going to be harder to navigate that neighborhood. And in many other places, it's the same. But I would love for us to really have a serious dialogue about
Mhm.
how else we can be making strategic
Mhm.
investments in elevating neighborhoods, and not in a way that is overly gentrifying, but ways where we can support neighborhoods that are established, where
Mhm.
we can make smart investment that really does support the fabric of what's there and just raise the bar so that everybody prospers in meaningful ways.
Nice. Well, I appreciate you
Oh,
coming on
this
the
is great.
show.
Yeah.
This was great.
Thank you so much.